My name is Brent Applegate, and I'll be your guide today to the mysterious world of concrete tile. So concrete roof tile has been around for about 150 years, and while modern production methods have greatly improved both the appearance and durability since the first tiles made in the 1800s, even these early tiles had a long demonstrated service life, in the 80-year range actually, and that's pretty important because they last. They're proven to last already, which is quite a rare thing in the roofing industry. So Janine there is holding up a tile. That's a 100-year-old tile. It came off a fully functioning roof, just to give you some idea. Tiles from a century or more ago were simply concrete poured into a mold and troweled smooth. Modern tile plants produce about 150 tile a minute using a very precise concrete mix made up of about 12 specific sizes of aggregate and then pressure extruded at about 5,000 psi. See the molds they're poured into and then they go through the machine. A 50-year non-prorated and fully transferable warranty is considered very conservative and has become the norm with all concrete roof tile manufacturers, some even bigger. It's considered to be conservative because modern producers expect to get an even longer service life than the 80 years plus already established historically by older concrete roof tiles. In North America, tile really started to take off as a common roofing product in the late 1950s, largely as a response to the demand for non-combustible roof material in the wake of all the devastating wildfires, especially down in California and Arizona, where they lost 3,000 homes in Oakland in one fire, for example, when embers jumped from roof to roof. So modern tile manufacturing plants were built in the U.S. during this time. Once the public became aware of the additional benefits inherent to concrete roof tiles, such as the aesthetics, they look great, good profile. I think everybody agree with that. The very low life cycle cost of a tile roof. Basically, it costs you so much a year to have it on. If it lasts 80 years, that's a good thing for life cycle costing. Then there's the great cooling effects, and we'll demonstrate that in a few minutes when they start doing the roof, but there's two complete roofs on the tile roof there. And so there's a real good cooling layer in the rain screen underneath of it. And of course, great environmental benefits because we're not continually filling up the landfill sites and dumping spent roofing products, which is quite a common thing these days during the re-roof cycles. And normal, they've got great wind, hail, freeze-thaw resistance, and all the things you'd expect from a roofing product. So, while tile's very well established, and it's a greatly increasing part of the sloped tile market in the sloped roofing market in the United States, just to give you some idea of how well established, last year they produced about 15 million square. I assume we've got a fairly educated audience here, so basically you know what a square is. So 100 square foot area, 10 feet by 10 feet is a roofing square. So that would be like 1.5 billion square feet of tile went down in the States. Having said that, unfortunately these days, the reality in Canada is we did about 100,000 square last year. So we got a little catching up to do, but we're pretty confident that as it grows, we're gonna get there. So in the early days, about 20 years ago, they used to use a gray tile and they used to slurry coat it. So you'll probably see some of those. The problem with that particular method, and all the older tiles were all gray, so they got nice color in them, but the slurry unfortunately would wear off and then you have a gray tile again. So if you really wanted a colored tile, then that wasn't a great option for you. So now what happens is by the 70s you get all through tile. So the mix goes right through, it's all the iron oxide pigment is mixed right through the whole tile, so the color is always going to be there. You'll get a little bit of change as it weathers, but it's always right through the same intensity. Then you can do painted tiles, basically any color you could ever want. You can paint it with a high solids. Again though, if you do a painted tile, you're into a maintenance issue, and probably about every 15 or 20 years you're going to want to repaint that color to keep it vivid. However, painted tiles are put on top of color through tiles. So clay tile has also really been around for millenniums. I mean, much longer than concrete. And because of that, most people would commonly see a tile roof and they'd call it a clay tile roof. That's actually quite inaccurate up here. There's probably a half a dozen in all of Calgary that I'm aware of. All the rest would be concrete. And there are no clay tile manufacturers up here whatsoever in Canada. So the thing with clay is it's a wonderful product. It's been shown to last, 300-400 years, even longer. I mean, sometimes they take the clay tile down and demolish the house and put them on the next one. They really do in Europe and that. Somebody's nodding. You're from Europe? Or there you go. So what ends up happening is the clay tiles are wonderful if they're properly done. And unfortunately, you don't always know that to look at them when you first get them. What ends up happening with clay tiles is that they have to be fired at about 2,000 degrees for 24 hours. They glow translucent. And if that process is fudged a little bit, then all of a sudden, instead of having a 400-year roof, you probably got a 10-year roof. And the thing starts to blow apart in the freeze-thaw cycles up here. You can get away with that in Mexico. You can't do that so well in Canada. So it's pretty important if you're going to bring clay up here, you know the manufacturer. That's a very, very important thing. So there's a lot of different varieties of profiles as well. Janine's holding up an estate tile over there. So the estate tile, or the low-profile S Spanish tile, there's a lot of different words, the villa tile, but essentially it's the classic tile. It's a very strong tile. The profile itself is quite strong because it's kind of different triangles. So because of that, it can also be made in a lightweight fairly easily, and you can get a lightweight that's great for re-roofing, and you don't have to do truss upgrades to. The split shake tile is just a derivative rather of the flat tile, and it's just brushed. Same tile, basically, same mold, and it's brushed. So it gives kind of a cedar look, and that's quite popular. You'll find in BC, anybody from BC, that's just about all you see now. The traditional S tile is not all that popular anymore. So then there's the fittings. That's what really sets a tile roof apart. You kind of get that picture frame look with a tile. And the fittings are used to kind of frame it in. So right now, Janine, she's got what's called a rake tile. You'll see the guys putting it on in a few minutes. That goes up the gables and kind of frames all the field tile in. So that's what they use in the rake. And then the next thing that comes after that is an angle tile. There's a couple of profiles of angle. That's a low profile. It's a very, very low fitting tile. You can use that on either the Spanish style or the slate, but traditionally it's been used on the slate because you're looking for those clean looks. Down below on our thing, we did the little tiny canopy and kind of the slate look, the flat pipe. So if that, normally that would have one of those kind of fittings on it. And then there's the more traditional barrel cap. So that's kind of sits way up in the air, and that's kind of the distinctive barrel ridge cap and hip look of a tile roof. And then when they start them, at the very beginning of a hip, you want to keep the birds out, you want to finish it off, you don't want a great big hole looking at you, so rather than mortaring it, most manufacturers have gone to a fitted starter tile. That's what they start the hips and the ridges with now. And then you have, on top of that, there's something called a cat face or a cookie. That would be used, we have one right here, hopefully I don't squeal. This is one right here. There's going to be one you'll see them install in a minute on the other end, and that simply finishes off the gable where it comes there. It's a nice finish piece, and it also keeps the cap up at the right level. And on top of that, there's a number of very specialized flashings that are used. Janine's holding up a piece of starter flashing. What you notice about that starter flashing is it fits the profile of the tile, and it's also got holes in the top. That's because we want to really encourage the under tile ventilation. I don't know if any of you heard Dr. Joe today, but he was talking about, you know, the under tile thing and how that acts different than other roofing products. And that's basically why, because there's a really good rain screen or cooling plane underneath the tile. On top of that, on the top of the roof, there's what's called a ridge venting. There's a couple of manufacturers of that. You can go over to one of the booths and see the manufacturer of this particular one. And it fits over onto the field tile, over the 2x2 buildup, and it's vented. So then what you have is that whole under tile area is really well vented. It's a little known fact about tile that's so well vented underneath, so you get a real good ventilation cavity right on top of your deck where you could really use it. And then on top of that, there's the channel flashing. Normally on a roof like a typical asphalt roof, you use step flashing where you come into a wall. On tile, you tend to use channel. It's a long strip, and you can see that the water sort of has a ridge so it can't get up there and the tile go over it. And interestingly, there's usually 2 flashings and 2 vents for everything. And then this is the valley. You'll see Janine holding a piece up. That's a pretty typical deep trough valley. The deep trough valley allows the water to go in, and then the tile comes over it, so you get a real nice drainage plane, and you'll see that as they go along here too. I don't know if you can see right on the demo, if you've got a good angle to see that. There's a piece of it installed in there as well. So all tile roofs are really 2 complete roofing systems, and while tile's obviously the primary water shedding component, there is a complete membrane roof system under the tile and the counterstrapping. And it's not meant to really be the primary water shedding. That's a bit of a mistake that some people make. They think the real roof is underneath the tile. That's not true at all. The tile is the real roof. But these days what happens is everybody's so busy, sometimes that membrane does end up getting called upon to be the real roof for quite a while, unfortunately. And so you have to do a real good job with that. So there's a number of these different membranes that you can use. And what the purpose of these membranes is if there was a little condensation, a little blowing snow, it's meant to drain a little bit of water off. I mean, the fact that it sometimes stays in place for 6 months and keeps the whole house dry and people are living there sort of shows that it's really upgraded these days. But the early tile was 15-pound felt, and then they came up with a code and they said minimum 30-pound felt. I'm just using generic terms here, but type 25. So that's what everybody used for a long time as a minimum once the A220 came out. These days, just about everybody's upgraded to at least a polypropylene membrane. There's a number of these out there, probably a dozen of them. There's 3 of them so far that are actually approved in Canada. They've gone through the A220 testing. And so most manufacturers will allow those ones to be put under their product. And then a further upgrade would be a typical peel and stick membrane. And you just peel the release sheet. That's actually what we have on the roof here. I'd always recommend, no matter what you're doing, that you run peel and stick at least up the valleys. You don't have to by code. It's one of those kind of common sense things. The code allows you to use a polypropylene because it's been tested for water shedding in valleys and eaves. So there was no concrete tile standard in Canada until 1991. Nada. So everybody was kind of on their own if they got a tile roof before 91. And then in 91, the first version of what's the concrete roof tile standard for Canada, the A220, was released. And we can be pretty proud of that. I'll tell you, having been down to the States and gone to lots of tile meetings down there with the other manufacturers, they are hugely jealous of Canada because we have a true double strapping system. That's what came out in the A220. It got upgraded to 30-pound felt minimum. There was an awful lot of additions that got put in place there. So that's been great. And it's just very recently been upgraded. But if you notice on the deck, what we've got here is we've got a peel and stick membrane. We've kind of upgraded to that throughout. So what the lads are going to do is they're going to start, we've done a lot of the roofing already. We've done that side of it. We've done one side of the valley, just so we don't keep you here until midnight. We thought we should do a little of that work. So the first thing that they're going to start on is the counter strapping. Now, what the counter strapping is going to do, this is the minimum counter strapping the A220 allows. This is a 10 millimeter or 3/8 of an inch OSB. What that's going to do is it's going to raise and give us a real good drainage plane underneath the tile when the tile battens come across to carry the tile. So anything that ever gets under there is going to drain off. Before 91, probably in practical terms before about 86, thanks Trough, they actually used to do direct batten, and to this day, right down in the States, they'll either do a direct laydown where they don't even use battens at all, or else they'll just use direct batten right on the roof. They don't do very much counter strapping, and that's why I say they're very jealous of our system up here, because it's a far superior system. The other thing that you can do, which is a really good idea, is upgrade that from a 10 millimeter to maybe 3/4 of an inch or even 1.5 inches if you're in a high snow area, and you can create a really nice airflow underneath there by doing that. It's more than just a drainage plane. It really gets a good airflow. Of course, you do get a good airflow with Spanish tile anyway because of the natural shape of them, so that helps quite a bit. All right, so this is the counter strapping, all those. Now, the next thing that they're doing is they're laying out for the bottom. The bottom is always the same. When they put concrete roof tile on, there's the A220 standard again, means that you have to have a minimum of a 3-inch headlap. So the 3-inch headlap, basically on a typical 16.5-inch tile, means that they're going to have 13.5 inches to the weather. So depending on the manufacturer, but if you're getting on a 16.5-inch tile, if you're getting 14 or 15 inches to the weather, you got an issue. So that's one thing to check real quick. So what they're doing is the bottom tile is pretty much always laid out the same. So what ends up happening is the bottom tile is measured, and they're going to have a nice piece of starter metal put on there in a minute. They're just snapping all their lines right now, and they're laying it all out so that they can figure out what their spacing is going to be. How they figure that spacing out is they put the bottom one on, they measure 13.5, and then they come up to the top, and they just drop about 1 inch down from the peak, and that's where the top one's going to come, and that way it avoids cutting a lot of tile. Whenever you do cut a tile, it's very, very important that it's mechanically fastened. Another thing to watch out for. So what ends up happening is you cut the lug off, because what ends up holding the tile, you'll see in a minute, is the lug on the back of the tile. And I'll just show you. There's a lug on here, so this lug hasn't been cut off, even though it's a valley tile, so that's going to be all right, because that's going to engage the 1x4 when they put it on there. But if you cut the lug off, then you have to take it, and you have to drill a new hole, and you have to mechanically fasten it, so that's quite important. So what Randy has just put on there is the starter metal. That's going to sit on top of the counterstrapping, and that allows the drainage plane to come right down and underneath and into the eaves trough. When they do the membrane, they allow it to hang 3/4 of an inch to an inch past the edge, so that any water that gets down there is going to drain off and into the eaves trough. And as I said, it's a double roof system. The other thing about tiles is that you have a 2 complete roofs, as we said earlier, so much so that every vent, you'll see we have a plumbing vent already done there with a pretty typical neoprene plumbing boot on it. Well, they're going to use another lead-based one over top of that here pretty quick. Then on top of that, there's a place where they're going to be putting an air vent to allow the air out of the attic. And then they're going to have to get that air out of the underneath of the tile area, so there's 2 vents for the air vents as well. They can use this flex vent product rather than using the air vent, which you'll see in a minute, and they'll do that over there. So the reason that they've just put the 2x2 on the bottom and on the side is that 2x2 on the bottom is going to actually hold that tile up a little higher, because all the rest of the tile are sitting on tile, but the bottom one isn't. So you want to keep the plane the same. So that's going to be an extra 3/4 of an inch up. And then the one on the side here that they put on, that's going to carry the rake tile that we talked about earlier. So the rake tile are going to get screwed right into the side. You never, even though there are holes in the side and in the top of a rake tile, you always use the side ones. That's basically how they go on. So you see now they've got it all laid out, and they're putting their battens. Those are the tile carrying battens, or the nailing strips. So they snapped their lines across there earlier, and now they're just putting it along, and they kind of move that 1x4 along to the line, because 1x4s aren't always straight. And that's going to be what the lug of the tile ends up sitting on. So they've got 3 of those. Once they start laying tile, you'll see it goes fairly quickly. Nailing patterns on tile are quite unusual compared to normal roofing products. Normally, with the roofing product, you nail something on the roof, and that's why it stays there. Well, tile is going to hang on that 1x4, and that's why it's going to stay there. So they don't even nail every row. Generally, on a new installation, for example, from a 412 to a 712, they're going to nail the 2 perimeter rows all around the edges, and then they're only going to nail every 3rd row after that, because the nails are way at the top of the tile. If you ever did get them working on it, you need wind clips if you're in that high wind area. Like if you're in Florida, you'll see tons of tile down there. Well, they're all clipped. They've got a clip on the nose. We don't have that kind of issue very much up here unless you go down to Pincher Creek or somewhere very, very highly windy. Or if you're on the edge of a big ravine, that's the one thing that I like to emphasize. If you're building a house on a big hill, then it's not a 50-foot house, even if it's a big 3-story. It might be a 500-foot house, because you have to really measure your house from the bottom of the hill for wind. Very important little consideration. So if you're building there, even though the code says that you're not in a wind area, don't believe it, because if you're in a high building, you have to clip them down as well. So Randy's got started here. You can see how that tile fits nicely right along that flashing, totally closes it up. That blocks all the vermin and birds and squirrels, keeps everything out. That's a fairly new product. There was some interesting kind of attempts to do that in the early days, and if you have one of those, then you should phone somebody and get this put in. Because you probably could have some birds, unless you really like the birds. So what they're doing now is Randy is putting in one of these hurricane clips I talked about. You'll see on the nose how that holds the nose. So right down here, that's going to hold the nose. Normally when they nailed, they would only nail one of these 2 holes. They wouldn't nail both of them. They pick the one closest to the counterstrap, because that's where the truss is. The counterstraps go on top of the trusses. So basically they would just put one nail in, and they wouldn't snug that nail. You will see guys screwing roofs. It's fine as long as you don't bury those screws. Because if you ever get a roof that's screwed and they put those screws in too tight, it binds the tile, and if it can't move and you step on it, it's not all that bendable. So that's when you can get into trouble. So you can see that they put a wind clip down there. Normally they would have nailed that whole row. Normally they would have used air guns to put all that stuff on. You know, that's kind of how things work. And they use a treated fastener of some description under there. Now, the next thing that Randy's putting on, he's got his bottom row done. You're pretending it's all nailed. Now he's putting his next flashing. You can see his one neoprene is already on there. Now he's putting another one on top of the tile level because you're going to make a complete watertight roof in the tile. You're not depending on that underlay to do anything for you. Okay, if you do get some problems, some blowing snow or something, but that tile roof should be completely impervious to water. That's the whole idea. You'll notice he's using a specialized tool. It's a wooden maul, because when you work with lead or malleable flashings, if you use a metal, then it can kind of damage it. You can set up some problems as far as electrolysis if you beat it too bad. So see, that curves very nicely into the tile. He's folding up the edges so that as it comes down there, the water would just kind of stay off the edges, wouldn't go down to the underlayment. Okay, the other thing he's doing now is a couple of booths here have snow management kind of things going on. So that there is meant, this is a snow bracket right here. It's kind of a fancy one. It's our Canadian version, got a nice flag on it. So what that is doing is that in a high snow load area, you want to keep the snow on the roof. Very important. You don't want that snow falling off and falling on people and wrecking your roof material. So how you do that is you put a series of those, depending on the slope of the roof and depending upon how high a snow load area, some of those factors, you put a series of them on. Then when you get a little bit of ice buildup because it warms up or anything underneath, that ice will actually bond to those little snow brackets. It keeps on there, stays a membrane, doesn't slide around, and in the spring it harmlessly melts off. Now you'll notice that Randy already had the cut tiles on there, so he went on and he went right around that vent on top. It's just shingling, any normal shingling kind of thing. Your vent always goes over top of your tile, and then the tile comes over your vent. Same with any flashing. So the next thing I want you to notice is that Randy's putting an air vent in. This is a very specialized little air collar, and it's really meant to, if there is ever any moisture underneath there, it's meant to drain off the moisture. Now you won't see those because for the most part, once that's in, that's taking the air out of the attic. Now he's going to tile over it, and before the roof is on, he's not going to install any of those. He's installing it now because he's up there with the tile. But if he went along and he installed a bunch of those and then the roof sat there for 6 months, people would not be very happy with them, right? Because you're going to get a lot of blowing snow and rain in it. So when they put both of the vents in is when they get up to it with the tile, and that covers about 50 square inches of net-free ventilation. It's tile ventilation's pretty much the same as the code, 1 in 300. In Canada, we're allowed to do 75-25 split, so a lot of people do it. I won't comment on if that's a good idea or not, but that's the code. So now what he's doing is he's putting a different type of a storm clip in. Again, what that's doing is hooking on the underside. It's a stainless clip, and it's just going to clip onto the nose of the tile. Goes on real quick and easy. Can't pull the nose up. You can put that down in hurricanes areas in Florida now. That'll keep that tile on the roof. So if you got any concerns about wind, spend a few extra dollars. They're not all that expensive, and have the guys clip them instead of nail them. So we've got the valley tile going on now. You'll know, there's our pre-cut again, but normally what the guys would do is they kind of rough cut them into the valley, and then they come along and they take their big diamond blade, and of course they always wear masks and hearing protection and goggles. Never seen anybody not do that. So that's how they're supposed to do it. And they would run up and they would cut that final cut 2 inches away from the center line. And it would be, it gives a real nice flow down the valley there. Something else I'd like to point out while they're just finishing off the top there, this ridge board, that's a couple of 2x2s. They should never use a 2x4 even though it's the same height, because what ends up happening is it's too wobbly. What they do is they splice the 2x2s. I don't know if you can tell there, but there's a splice in here and they've gone over it with the next one. It's pretty wobbly if you line up your splices. It's pretty wobbly if you toenail a 2x4. This is what the cap is going to fit on. It's not supposed to sit on the field tile. It's supposed to sit on this. So what they do is they figure out how high they have to get up the roof. And how they figure that out is they take a piece of cap, as you'll see in a minute. Randy's just finishing the valley, and then they're going to come over here. They figure out how high they have to get up the roof, but they don't want to get any higher than they have to. So as soon as it's sitting on here and it's engaged in here and not on the field tile, that's how high they build that ridge buildup. And same with hips. That's kind of how the whole thing works. Now, we've got a couple of different hip treatments, as I said earlier. One other thing I want you to notice is that Randy's, well, he's probably lighter than me, but I mean, he weighs a little bit, and he's scrambling all over that roof. I don't ever want to hear anybody tell me you can't walk on tile. Drives me crazy. I hear that all the time. You can walk on tile. It's fine. Just, it's really a good idea if it's new tile. Oh, here's something else Randy's going to show us. Remember I said earlier, underneath here we got a rain screen. So Randy's pouring tile underneath there. So what happens if we get tile? It's coming underneath here and into the eaves trough. That works out pretty cool, eh? If it gets on top of the tile, that's what it's supposed to do. It goes over top of that and into the eaves trough. Either way, we have moisture, we have an eaves trough, and all the water goes in the eaves trough. So both roofs perform quite well that way. Works really good. Okay, now what they're doing, well, just before you put that on, Randy, let me point one little thing out. Can you just lift that up for a sec? See, he's got a little piece of chicken wire in there. Again, that's just to keep the little birdies discouraged from building their nests and that kind of thing. He's also got a little nail that's just keeping that up in the air, keeping the angle so it doesn't fall. He's extended the flashing a little bit to the side so it doesn't dive in, because all the other tile are going to end up going, sitting on top of the one below it, whereas the bottom one has to be at that same position. So that's what he's doing there. And now he's just simply screwing it in here. Now, in high snow areas, it's a real good idea if you're using a rake system. It's a good idea to use screws rather than nails. They hold better. And it's also a good idea to caulk the corners and caulk them into the roof. That's not a code thing, but it is a good idea thing. And the code is minimum always, remember? So it's a good idea to upgrade some of these things if you're in a high snow area. Now what they're doing is they're putting the rake in. You notice he just threw that up and he butted it under the row below. So that's how the rake are. They come into 90. He's lining it up nice. It fits into the tile below. And he's putting a couple screws in it. He's using 3-inch screws, 3.5-inch screws, long screws at the bottom especially. He can use a little shorter one at the top because it's tight to the 2x2 that's on there. But in the bottom, it's pretty important that you get through that gap and you really want to bite into there. The same when you're nailing your strapping on. You use 2.5-inch nails generally because you want to get at least an inch into all of your truss and everything there. So once he gets up there in the top, the other thing that I'd like to point out is the ridge treatment. Just while they're finishing the rake off there, and they pre-cut some of them already. You notice on this side of the rake, they're going to put some cap on there in a minute. This is, again, flex vent, and it's a wonderful product. It really goes through. It's got a butyl that seals down, seals everything nice, and then they're going to put cap over that, and it's all going to breathe really nice under there. We're a big believer in the vented system. Let's vent those spaces. Let's try and encourage the natural ventilation that we've got going with tile. It's one of the big advantages of tile anyway, and if we encourage it, it really helps prevent ice damming, really helps prevent heat transfer into your attic, because by the time that heat kind of gets saturated into the concrete, which takes a long time anyway because it's thermal mass principle, but by the time it does saturate into the concrete, starts going down where it normally transfers into the attic, it transfers into that rain screen, and a lot of it gets vented away. So you'd be surprised how cool that can keep your house. So what's going on here now is Javier, he's rolling that flex vent. He's taken the peel and stick butyl off and he's just rolling that in nicely. So that's going to keep everything out from getting into your tile cavities. So use a good urethane-based caulking. You can use a butyl, but don't be using silicone. And thermoplastic is all right. So you can see how they're flying here. They're going to quit doing the thing. They showed you how to do it, and I don't want to cut into Howard's time for the standing seam, which is great. So they're just going to throw these ones on here. And what ends up happening is they complete the cap. Normally we'd be doing little cuts with the diamond blade just to make them fit at the ends and into the cat faces and everything here. And there we go. We got all those done. So we got a few more trim tiles to do. Now in the other end, what Randy's going to do is a different type of cap. So this is the big barrel cap we talked about earlier. See, that's kind of the traditional tile look. Now what I want you to notice, a lot of people think they really want the flat look, but what you'll find is that this traditional tile look, if it's not red and it doesn't have barrel cap, it actually looks really good. That's a lot of what people are looking for. When they picture tile, they tend to picture that it's kind of round and red and heavy and all of those things. So what Randy's doing here is he's using what would normally be used traditionally on a slate or a flat tile, but he's using it on the estate, and it just brings the whole profile down. So for an architectural look, that really, really works well. And what he's doing is he's going to pop across and finish that cap there. The cookie, you can see a little better from your angle there, is holding that cap at the right angle, fitting in place, and away it goes. In the meantime, Javier back here is just finishing off the rake tile. It's all cut in nice around the cookie for a real finished look. And you're starting to get the idea of what I talked about earlier. when you look at a tile roof, it's a picture frame. It's like you have the field and it's all nicely framed in. And that's what people really like about the look of tile. The other thing they really like is it increases their house value about $10,000. Go ahead there, Andy. Oh, now you got a broken tile. You shouldn't do that to your tile. But if you happen to do that kind of thing to your tile and you have a broken one, I want to show you just exactly how fast it is to switch out a tile. First of all, fairly expensive, these tile. They're at least $1.50 each. So, you know, you don't want to break a lot of them. If you break 5 of them, you know, you're up for $7.50. So it's a pretty expensive proposition. And it's probably, if I were to hit my stopwatch, I'd say we got about 20 seconds into this process. And he's even doing the extra step of nailing that one. You bring them back down. And there you have it. There's a tile repair. So, thank you very much, lads. You guys are true artists. You really know your stuff.